All right, we are live, guys. We'll give it a couple minutes for people to come on.
Okay.
And then I'll do a little intro here. You guys like that music?
Sure, that's cool.
Okay.
Where's the 80s music, Jim?
Well, the problem is that you have to use their music because it's not copyrighted. If we use like Top Gun, then YouTube would not accept it. Yeah, so you gotta be really careful with that.
I want to use Top Gun.
I do too. Well, maybe I'll figure out a way to do that. So, all right, we'll get started here. Let me get us on the screen. All right, yeah, we got people on already. Great. All right, welcome everybody. This is Wisconsin Right Now Uncensored. Welcome back. I am Jim Pivovarczyk, and my co-editor and co-host of Wisconsin Right Now, Jessica McBride. And
hi, everybody.
Moms for Liberty, Scarlett Johnson. Hello.
Hi.
I'm going to turn on the music. And welcome, everybody. We will be shortly, our guest tonight will be Justice Dan Kelly. I see it appears he may be in the green room already. We are going to be asking him, well, I kind of see, yeah, he's kind of great. Hopefully his picture will come on. So we'll be talking to him shortly. We got less than 2 weeks to the election. And internal poll that we just recently learned about has the race down. Dan Kelly's now down only 2 points, which I think is terrific news. Jessica?
Well, I mean, what we're hearing about the internal polling is that Dan Kelly is closing the gap and that he has the momentum. And as somebody told me, in politics, you want to peak at the right time. And so I think the conventional wisdom right now is that he's peaking at the right time. I think a couple of weeks ago we were hearing that he was 8 to 10 points out. I know there was a poll that was leaked to Urban Milwaukee showing, probably from the Janet side, showing he was 10 points out. That was a couple of weeks ago. Then we heard about a poll from WMC where he was about 4 points out. And the more recent poll is 2 points down. So peaking at the right time. I think that's why you're seeing Janet Protasiewicz and honestly some people in the media going into overdrive right now to censor and silence our stories about Janet Protasiewicz because it's getting really close here.
Yeah. And I also think the early voting, that is something unique that we are, as Republicans, we are getting out to vote early. And I know Dan O'Donnell is doing this thing where he has people text me if you voted early, and it's like thousands of people every day. I know that I'm going to vote tomorrow. My husband's already voted. My daughter's voted. So my mom, we are trying to get everyone, hey, get out to vote. And if you're about to leave for spring break and you're listening, you haven't voted yet, go vote tomorrow. Don't wait. Who knows what could happen? Vote before you go on vacation. And if you have an absentee ballot, make sure that you've sent that in because you're getting to the deadline for that. But I think that there has been a rallying cry across Wisconsin that we are going to vote early. Scott Pressler has been very integral to that, as well as all the county parties. I know they have all really stressed this, and I think we're doing a really good job, and we just got to keep getting that vote out early and banking those votes early.
For everyone watching tonight, you can comment if you guys have any questions. We already have several questions I think we each one would like to ask Justice Kelly, but feel free to comment, and if something really sticks out as good, we'll definitely ask it. With that, unless anyone else has anything, I'm going to try to bring on Justice Kelly. So, Justice Kelly, are you there?
I'm sorry. He's coming to us, I believe, he was just at Steel Tank. There's a Lake Country Patriots writers group. Luke Koieski, Oconomowoc Alderman, is involved in that group, organizing that group. And I believe Justice Kelly was there tonight I was asked to speak and I
Indeed.
wanted to, but unfortunately, I couldn't because I was preparing for this. But I believe that he's coming to us from Oconomowoc.
I am indeed, and so I'm sitting in the car right now. So it not really, a good video. So I hope this is okay. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's great because I have a face that is custom designed for radio, and so I think this makes me most comfortable.
Okay,
But
well,
thank
we'll
you so.
take your voice.
All right, wonderful. Thanks
Yeah.
so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate this.
Thank
Well, we
you.
appreciate your time, sir.
Oh, look, there are 24 hours in the day, and I'm not sleeping until April 5th. So I got plenty of time.
Well,
Justice,
let's dive right in.
We were
Yeah.
commenting right before you came on that internal polling that we've seen now has this race down to 2 points. It is a tight race. We got less than 2 weeks. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is exactly where we need to be. So, I think what we're seeing is that our fellow Wisconsinites are turning their attention to this race now. So it starts, people pay attention in kind of concentric circles. There are the people at the very center who watch politics all the time. And they pay attention to every single race, right when it starts, all the way through completion. But then the folks in Wisconsin who have their lives ordered in a really good way, so that they're taking care of the really important things: faith, family, friends, work, community. They don't have a tendency to start turning their attention until the campaign enters its last few weeks. And so what I think we're seeing is that the good folks of Wisconsin are starting to pay attention. And every time they do, they take their responsibility to tend to the fundamental structure of our government seriously. And so as they start looking at this closely, I think they start to see, what we've known all along, which is we've got a really stark contrast in front of us. We have the choice between the rule of law or instead the rule of Janet.
Yeah.
And I think they're looking at this and going, oh, wait, what? You mean Janet wants to put herself above the law? You mean she wants to be the reference point instead of the Constitution? No, we don't want any of that. And so as we go through this process and we get closer and closer to the election, I expect that we'll start pulling in the lead pretty soon, because I know that our fellow Wisconsinites still treasure their liberties and the Constitution that protects them. And I think that what they're going to find is they start paying attention to what Janet's been saying, is that she's going to set all of that aside so that the laws that you can have, she'll dictate that. She'll tell you what laws you can and cannot have. She'll tell you what liberties you may and may not enjoy.
Justice Kelly, is it true that you're only 2 points down in internal polling? What's the recent polling showing from your perspective?
Yeah, that's our understanding. So, we've heard about the poll that WMC has done, and that sounds about right. I mean, it reflects what we're experiencing as we travel around the state of Wisconsin. And, there is a level of outrage that is building about the kind of things that Janet's saying. So they're looking at these ads that she's running against me, and they know they're garbage. They know that this is a pack of lies. And interestingly enough, even Janet has, in a roundabout way, admitted that they're a pack of lies.
Yes.
So I saw a tweet this afternoon. It's just remarkable. So she was newspaper editorial board had met with her, and they were questioning her about some of these garbage ads that she's been running against me. And her response to it was just priceless. She says, oh, well, I'm really not in charge of the ads. That's the ad companies. They're doing that. That's not my responsibility. Wait a minute. What? I mean, you've got one of two options at that point. Either she has told her campaign team, go ahead and make up whatever lies you want to make up about Dan. I'm not going to check those. I'm not going to fact check my own campaign. Or she in fact did know about the lies that she's been telling about me, and now she's trying to throw her campaign team under the bus. So she's lying about them. Either way, it fits in. It fits into the pattern that she's demonstrated through this whole campaign. It's just one lie after another.
So let's dive right into some of the recent stories in the news. I know, Jim, you had the first question on the big exposés that we've been doing into
Yeah.
Janet Protasiewicz's past.
Yeah. Yeah. Justice Kelly, I'd like to ask you is, I think you're probably aware, Jessica and I at Wisconsin Right Now, we've written several articles now in which we've been able to document through witnesses, and more than one witness, I should add, and some named, some unnamed sources, in which there's allegations of assault to deceased now Judge Patrick Madden, and also that she had made racial slurs in the past. We have 2 ear witnesses to that. And I'm just curious to know from your standpoint, I know we have been very frustrated. We think that these are huge stories, and that, you know, we have had such, we've struggled to really get the media to engage on this. We know if this was a conservative candidate, that this would be national news. Every outlet would pick it up. If these allegations had been brought against you, it probably would have been every other question against you in the debate. And yet the media, up until very recently, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel finally touched on it, in which the headline was, you know, Janet was considering suing us. I'm just interested on your
Which she
comments
took back.
on that. Which, yeah, she ended up taking back in a later article. I'm just interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I think, you know, the work that you've done shows that there are credible allegations of this kind of horrible behavior, and if those allegations turn out to be true, that's really significant. Now, that's also a very big if, right? So they, at the current moment, they're allegations, and so I think that I think these things should be investigated. And I think that there is a great deal of responsibility to investigate those claims and bring those to a resolution. Now, obviously, I haven't been talking about those because while they're allegations, I think it would be inappropriate for me to address those. So I think one of the reasons that I was an effective attorney when I was practicing is I made sure that I didn't bring anything to the court that I didn't have facts for, and that I was confident I'd be able to establish beyond reasonable doubt. Now, I think it's also one of the reasons that I was an effective justice is because I was punctiliously careful about the things I said and made sure that I had unimpeachable evidence of what we were saying. And so I think that this is an important story that you're working on, and you know, and you're right. I mean, if this was if the shoe was on the other foot and these kind of allegations were being made about me, there would not even be a speed bump for the mainstream media. They'd jump in with both feet, and there'd be no looking back. And so their behavior on this story is, well, let's just say it's curious, because I remember, as you probably do too, that during the primary, the mainstream media was all over Everett Mitchell and the allegations made against him.
Yes.
And the fact that they were allegations didn't stop them a heartbeat. So I wonder why they went after him, but they're taking a very hands-off approach to Janet.
Well, and I had commented, sorry, Scarlett, you know, on Facebook that I raised the question of whether that's a racial disparity in news coverage, where you have the African-American candidate, Everett Mitchell, who's, you know, high conflict divorce, and allegations against him from years ago were big news, but some news organizations are censoring the allegations against the white candidate, Janet Protasiewicz. Do you think that there's a racial disparity potentially in that difference of coverage?
I don't know because, in part that would require kind of crawling into their minds to figure out what they're subjectively thinking. But, the way that we're treated, if there is anything that appears to be that,
Yep.
the left will immediately jump to the conclusion that it's race-based. So is it? I don't know. I think normally the mainstream media would jump right up and say that it is. So not entirely sure why they're treating us the way they are.
I was going to make the same point that Jessica did. I find it very curious as well that they were fine attacking Everett Mitchell, who is an African American judge, but it's their kid gloves with Janet Protasiewicz. Like they're not going after her with credible stories of what she's done. And I'm, as a Puerto Rican woman, the fact that she used ethnic slurs against Black Americans, Black Wisconsinites, and Hispanic as well, I find very offensive. And I think that I think the media should look into them. I think that these are very credible accusations. And I'm disgusted with the fact that the legacy media, had this been something that had been said of you, it would be CNN, MSNBC, front page news, national news. There'd be national media crews everywhere investigating every last bit of this. And the only coverage that we are seeing is the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel front page story. We're like basically a threat to sue the two honest reporters, the only reporters doing their job. I find that's really troubling.
Well, I think it's wildly troubling, especially the threat to sue. So one of the things that a good jurist knows, well, okay, let me take that back. The first thing that a minimally competent jurist knows is that we have a First Amendment that protects a very robust area of discussion, especially when it comes to those who hold public office or who aspire to hold public office. The idea is that the bosses in this country, and that would be the people of Wisconsin, the people of the United States, that they must have the most freedom possible to discuss amongst themselves matters that they might believe to be important to the decisions they make, and especially with regard to who will use their authority in public office. And so when a jurist comes along and makes a threat to sue, that strikes me as something meant to chill free speech. I think that's horribly irresponsible.
And so, you had actually released a press release when our first story came out about the allegations of, physical abuse by Janet to Judge Madden. And you said, I'm quoting here, that, the allegations were troubling to say the least, that Wisconsinites deserved a swift and full explanation. And yet the media, I don't believe anyone in the media ran your statement. Is this censorship, Justice Kelly?
Well, it would be censorship if an arm of government came along and said, "Thou shalt not publish that." What I think this is just flat out irresponsible. There is, if not a legal responsibility, certainly a moral responsibility of the press to cover news that people need to know. And, in the statement that we released, I expected that to be covered. That's why we released it. And so when it was just roundly ignored by the press, I think they did it because, it doesn't. The statement didn't make me look bad. And the only thing the press is really interested in running, about me at least, is anything that would possibly make me look bad. So I think they just they ignored it for that reason. But they are definitely putting their thumb on what people are hearing about.
And I guess I wanted to ask one follow-up question. We can move on from this topic pretty soon here, but you said that you think there should be an investigation. You called the allegations credible. Who do you think should do the investigating? John Chisholm reviewing her past, cases in children's court, the news media? you know, the Judicial Commission, the Chief Judge, all of the above? Like, who should do the investigating?
Yeah, that's a good question, and frankly, I haven't thought much about it. I just think that the people of Wisconsin are owed an explanation, at the very least. They're owed an explanation about these allegations. They need to know. Let's say they're not true. Let's say the allegations are false. The people of Wisconsin need to know that. They need to learn that, because that could adversely affect their decision-making process. So, as you know, I would very much like to prevail on April 4th in this race for the Supreme Court. But I want to prevail in an honest and fact-filled, straightforward campaign. I don't want anything out there influencing this that is not true. And so I think it would be a travesty if these allegations turned out to be not true, but ended up influencing the election. I think that would be terribly inappropriate. So an explanation here in an investigation to see whether these are true is important one way or the other. If the investigation reveals that the allegations are not true, people in Wisconsin need to know that. But if the investigation reveals that the allegations are true, well, they need to know that too.
If it were proven to be true that, Janet Protasiewicz used racial slurs, to refer to African Americans and Hispanics, would that be disqualifying to be on the state Supreme Court?
Well, if that turns out to be true, that would just be one more disqualifying aspect to my opponent's candidacy. There are a whole lot out there right now. I mean, she's demonstrated herself to be a serial liar. Everything that she says about me is just not true. And that offends me, one, because I resent being lied about. But I'm disappointed in it because they're just sloppy lies too. I mean, honest to God, if you're going to lie about me, put some effort into it. I mean, try to do a credible job of it. But it only takes about 5 minutes, anyone with an internet connection, to find out that she's just engaging in serial lies. So, that's disqualifying. Her commitment to put herself above the law, that's disqualifying. Her promise to bring her politics to the court, that's disqualifying. I mean, we could go down a whole laundry list of reasons that she is disqualified. And I don't mean things that I disagree with. I mean disqualifying.
What do you think is the biggest lie? What is the biggest lie that she's told in the campaign?
So I think the biggest one actually is the one she tells about herself. So she goes around the state of Wisconsin talking about nothing but her politics. And she says that she's actually willing to put her thumb on the scales of justice in deciding cases. And then she'll come along and say, oh, but don't worry, I can be impartial and I will decide cases according to the law. I think that's the biggest lie.
Redrawing the district maps.
Yeah.
That's one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know if you had a chance to see the debate that we had on Tuesday. And by the way, that was the only debate she's agreed to. All right. So you saw her and what she said about the maps, in which she essentially admitted that she will not restrain herself to the role of the court. So we were talking about, what the court's authority is to address the maps. And I went through the constitutional analysis, looking at Article 4, Section 4, and where that tells us that, the districts have to be reasonably compact. They need to be contiguous territory. They need to be bounded by certain municipal lines. And then, of course, you have to comply with the Voting Rights Act. Those are legal standards. And the maps have to meet those legal standards. But whether or not they are fair as a political apportionment of representation, that's political discussion. Those are political questions to be discussed in the political branch. And she stood right up and said, oh, no, I'm going to address the fairness of the maps in the court if she's elected. And so she's
equitable maps.
Yeah.
She wanted equitable maps.
Right.
She wanted equitable maps. And we all know what equity means. Equalizing outcomes.
Right. And equitable according to whom?
Yes.
I mean, she is the reference point for all questions.
Yeah.
And this is one of the biggest dangers we could possibly have on our Supreme Court, is a justice who thinks that she's the reference point.
Yeah.
The reference point always must be objective. It's got to be the Constitution, the statutes passed pursuant thereto, and that's it. It can't be yourself, because if it's yourself, that's what we call a judicial tyranny.
Yep.
Justice Kelly, I wanted to take a couple questions from the comment thread, and there's a sort of a continuous refrain, similar questions. I'm just going to paraphrase them. There's a number of people calling on you to, quote unquote, get in the dirt with these people, fight harder. Being the bigger, better person in this fight is a losing strategy. I'm reading from the comments. Like, some people want you to hit harder, so to speak, figuratively speaking. They want you to go at her harder on some of these allegations and so forth.
Take the gloves off.
Sure.
Take the gloves off is a common theme. Yeah.
Yep. So I've taken the gloves off in the way that is appropriate for a judicial candidate to do. I mean, I just went through the laundry list of things that disqualify her from being on the court. Any one of those is enough to count her out. Now, I know what they're talking about, and I'm not going to do that. My dad was a cowboy when he was young, and I learned a lot of my lessons from my dad. And one of the things he told me is the only thing you get from wrestling with a pig is dirty. And there is no universe in which I will degrade myself and degrade the institution of the court to win a seat. I won't do that.
This isn't a political election, and I think that I admire you for the way you're handling yourself, because you're handling yourself like you're running to be a Supreme Court judge, not to be governor. This isn't. She is very political. She's changing the tone of the way that future elections will be if she wins. I think it's proper to set the precedent that when you are running for Supreme Court, this isn't a political office. This is about rule of law. This is about following the Constitution. This is about politics. You're not running to be a political candidate. And I also thought that in the debate that you called her out and right to her face and said, "You're lying. You are misrepresenting me." So I thought you did a good job of that.
Thank you.
Justice, I would like to ask another common complaint that we've been receiving are ads. Everyone is seeing Janet ads plastered everywhere, online, on TV, and yet it appears to us and a lot of our readers that there are very few of your ads going out. Can you comment on that? What's going on? Do you plan on doing a major ad buy? Any comment?
Yeah, so our ads are rolling out now, and our TV ads are rolling out now. We've had digital already for a while. So let me. This is, I think, a mark of where we're at in a remarkable race. So the amount that we've been spending on ads in any other year, people will be looking at that and going, "Wow. That's a lot of ads that Kelly's got out there." But that's not this year. So what's happened, of course, is that there are billionaires across the country who are just pouring money into my opponent's campaign coffers. So she's got a ton of money that she can burn every single day the way that she is. And so would I like to have more ads up? Of course I would. But there is a reality here, which is they cost money. And so, if you've got George Soros funneling in millions of dollars and using the Democratic Party of Wisconsin as a conduit to transfer unlimited amounts of money directly into Janet's campaign coffers, well, that's going to have an effect. And this is what that effect is. Now, at the end of the day, we will have spent enough to get our information out to everyone who needs it. I'm completely confident that every voter in the state of Wisconsin who is going to come to this race with an open mind and will look at it according to what the court is supposed to do rather than what legislators do, they'll have the information they need to make that decision. They'll have the information to know what the stakes are, and they'll know which one of the candidates will stand up for the Constitution and the liberties that it protects. And really, at the end of the day, that's all you really need to accomplish. Because once they have that information and are convinced of the importance of the race, they'll come out and they'll vote.
Justice Kelly, I wanted to talk about one of the stories that I guess I believe the media have been treating you very unfairly on. I say that based on a review of the documents. Jim and I did a story sort of debunking the media coverage, and that would be the fake elector story, which, every time I turn around, there's like some news. Now, we actually went and we read the transcript of the comments of Andrew Hitt, right? And so we know the facts in that, but I'd like you to tell viewers and listeners the facts on this so-called quote unquote fake elector story, where they're trying falsely, I think, to make it sound like you were somehow for the fake electors or advising Andrew Hitt on fake electors or somehow involved in fake electors.
Yeah. So that's, I've been watching that, and it's just unbelievable what they're doing. So the press is, they still tell people that they are objective, but there's no doubt in my mind at all that they are skewing the story as hard and as fast as they possibly can. So, the truth of the matter is this. So, of course, I'm an attorney and I have clients. That's kind of how that works. And one of my clients was the Republican Party of Wisconsin. And Andrew, I can say these things because Andrew has issued a partial waiver of the attorney-client privilege and has spoken on the subject itself. And so I can speak on it to the extent that Andrew has, but not beyond that. So Andrew testified in Congress that he had one conversation with me. He called me and he asked if I was in the loop on this alternate elector idea. And I said that I wasn't, didn't know anything about it. And so we chatted about it for about half an hour, and that was it. Now, I know the press has tried to turn that into Dan Kelly was the motivating factor for this, and he was the center of the effort to try to overturn the election. And one of the reasons I kind of chuckle about this is because that, of course, is not true, could not be further from the truth. And that is documented by all the people who've come to me, and they're angry with me because I was not in the middle of the attempt to overthrow the election. So on this sort of thing, you just can't win for losing.
Well, and I would have you deny you're an election denier, but then the media would run a headline saying Kelly denies he's an election denier, and it would be the headline for like weeks. Yeah. So I'm not going to ask you that question, but I would know. I would note that you are on the record. I've read this, that you said you believe that, Joe Biden won the 2020 election, and you've never, I've seen nothing from you ever saying that election was invalid or that you were for fake electors or anything like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because there's absolutely nothing out there about that, because I would never say such a thing.
Yeah, right. Maybe we should move on to crime, Scarlett. We've got a lot to talk about with Janet's sentencing record.
I would like to start off, Justice, during the debate that the Jovian Reese rape case came up, in which you looked at Janet and you said you looked at him and you said you saw a good man in him, and then you said you didn't think he was a danger to society. And Janet's response was, well, I certainly like to see the transcript in total. It certainly doesn't sound like anything I would do. I mean, we've now pulled the transcript, and we did find her actual words were, are you a danger? And this is when she was addressing Jovian Reese at sentencing. Are you a danger to the public? I don't think so. I mean, I don't think that you did anything other than engage in a crime of opportunity, and hopefully you've learned your lesson. In regard to your character, there's a lot of good things about you. Now, I'd like to remind our listeners, Jovian Reese raped his cousin while she was asleep. He was initially charged with second-degree sexual assault, which is a 40-year felony. That later got pled down to a third-degree sexual assault, punishable by up to 10 years. District attorney chose not to do the incest charge, which would have been an additional 12 years. And she was a blood relative. She was his cousin. And instead, Janet gave him only 14 months in prison, 18 months in supervision. Comment on that.
Yeah. So, and so she did all of that and said all of that after she heard the victim testifying that she could no longer work, that she would sob every day, and that her boyfriend abandoned her as, quote, damaged goods. And then this is what her commentary is about this heinous crime. I mean, it is just remarkable to me that any competent, responsible judge could say such a thing, and then to lie about having said it. I'm just shocking.
I'm a mom of 5 kids. I have 4 daughters, and I am disgusted and appalled, and I'm tired. I'm tired of these weak-on crime judges. I am tired of these judges that don't take sexual assault seriously. I cannot believe she is unfit to be a judge, in my opinion. And she certainly shouldn't be rewarded with a Supreme Court seat. What she did is a slap in the face to all women, to all girls, particularly women and girls who have been sexually assaulted. She has said she doesn't care about them. She puts politics first. She'll say anything to get elected. She's accused of elder abuse. She's accused of saying racial slurs. She clearly has no regard whatsoever for Black and brown people in Milwaukee. And as where she is situated as a judge, they are the ones that are victimized the most by her horrendous decisions. And I cannot believe that she is running around claiming to be a champion of people like me, people that were born poor, people born in Milwaukee, people with brown skin. How dare she? That's what I have to say. How dare you?
Amen. Amen.
That's that.
I wanted to ask you, Justice.
I think you had the last word on that. That was
that was pretty good.
Beautifully stated.
Justice Kelly, the other side comes back at you with these ads about supposedly you representing child molesters. Like, we've heard the facts on that too. They're obviously blowing that sort of wildly out of proportion, when it comes to what you actually did with, I think it was one case. But we see these ads over and over and over again. Can you talk about the child molester ads and what's the truth of those?
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. The first law firm I worked for out of law school assigned me the Spalding cases, and I handled a couple of pretrial matters and then moved on to the law firm where I'd spend the vast majority of my career before the Supreme Court. And I didn't take the case with me. So that was the full extent of my involvement in that case, is just handling a couple of pretrial matters. I didn't represent them at trial. But here's the real problem with that ad. She is smearing every single attorney who handles criminal defense cases. And as everyone who's ever watched a cop show knows, criminal defendants are guaranteed to have a lawyer represent them.
Yes.
And that's an incredibly important role that lawyers play. And they have to play this, because you know what happens if the defendants don't get lawyers? We can't prosecute them. And after a while, they just get spun back out into the communities that they were just taken from. So our whole criminal justice system depends entirely on attorneys being willing to take these cases. Now, I know from my years on the Supreme Court that it's difficult to find enough attorneys to take these cases. They don't pay well. And oftentimes they actually lose money because they don't pay enough to cover their overhead. But so it's difficult enough to find attorneys to do it with that hanging over their head. But if you have a member of the judiciary coming out and saying the only reason you would take a criminal case is because you like the crimes your clients are accused of committing, what are the chances that you're going to be willing to represent them? I mean, you're already losing money. You want to lose your reputation too? Because someone
Well,
like Janet Protasewicz is slandering you? That's ridiculous.
And in that debate, she had complained that there aren't enough criminal defense attorneys and they don't make enough money out of one side of her mouth, and then immediately basically disparaged anyone who ever takes on a case as a criminal defense attorney. Because
That's right.
what you said, if you take on that case, you must like what they did, which we operate under rule of law. We also operate under the principle that you are innocent until proven guilty. To basically
Exactly.
deny to everyone is entitled to representation. That is just a foundational principle of our democracy and of our legal system. And frankly, as a leftist, come on. Criminal defense attorneys pretty much, we know that they tend to lean to the left a lot of times. She says things, she's disingenuous. She says whatever people want to hear, whatever group, she puts her finger out to the wind. And that's why she shouldn't be a judge. She should resign her position and run for what she really wants to do. Be a politician. That's
That's right.
Become a politician.
Yeah, I think that's right.
What you want to do. Stop pretending to be a judge.
Yeah, exactly. And and on that point, there have been several criminal defense attorneys who are liberals who have come to me and said, "Thank you so much for defending us, for sticking up for us." I've known scores of criminal defense attorneys throughout my career, and I've dealt with a bunch of them while I was a Supreme Court justice, and I have never yet once met a criminal defense attorney who approves of the crimes their clients are accused of committing. I mean, the very idea is preposterous.
Yes, I have some good friends that are criminal defense attorneys, and they are good people. They are honest people, and they're doing their job, and a job that is needed in America, because that's the way our system operates. And it's just what she's doing is wrong, but it suits her politically. So she'll do whatever it takes to win. She'll say whatever it takes to win. This is not a person who's qualified to be a Wisconsin Supreme Court justice.
Yeah. Well said.
So Jim, you put up an interesting graphic. We were talking about this before the show.
Yeah. Yeah, why don't you bring it up? I think you did a little bit more
Sure.
research than I did. Yeah.
Okay, so Justice Kelly, I'm not sure if you've looked in the background of this organization, Citizen Action Wisconsin. They endorsed Janet Protasewicz, and you can see here, this is a tweet from her page in which she's very proud of this endorsement. She says, "Together we will take back our Supreme Court," blah, blah, blah. Well, we looked up this group, and on their website, they very prominently outline an extremely radical and extremist left-wing platform when it comes to criminal justice. For example, this group advocates not prosecuting as adults anybody under the age of 25. Let me repeat that.
Yeah.
They actually want, and they referred to them as youths, okay? And they said anyone under 25, I guess, should be prosecuted in juvenile court. They want to decriminalize all drugs. They want to cut incarceration in half, eliminate gang databases. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Where's the media coverage of this endorsement that Janet is touting?
So she basically wants to turn Wisconsin into Chaz.
Yeah, I think maybe
Portland.
so.
Yeah.
I mean, this goes beyond soft on crime. This organization is pro-crime. They actually want criminals to be able to wander around doing their criminal things without repercussions. And I think it's a legitimate question to ask Janet, well, what do you think about that? What's your position on that? You're a politician, so what do you think about the policies they're proposing? I'd love to hear her asked about that.
Well, look at her tweet. Like, together we'll take back the Supreme Court, and she's so excited she got their endorsement. To me, that means that, if you're accepting the endorsement, you're excited about it, and you're going to work together with the group, you're basically saying you're signing on to their agenda. unless you expressly say you're not in different ways, which she hasn't done.
She
Yeah.
sounds like a George Soros DA. She honestly does. She sounds like a George Soros DA who's going to come in and turn Wisconsin into Portland, into Los Angeles. There'll be feces on the ground. There'll be people shooting up wherever. You know what? You can't manage to put anyone in jail anymore. It's bad enough. This is ridiculous. Wisconsin. We're not New York City. This is Wisconsin. Wisconsinites need to vote against her and vote for rule of law and common sense.
Except,
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
in the debate, in the debate, she tried to stand up there and pretend that she's cared about public safety her whole life.
Yeah, so some evidence of that would be nice. And yet, what we had was her the history of light sentences that we pointed out, and then and the really telling thing about this is, okay, so we identified those, and she was asked about these on an interview show about a couple months ago, I guess it was now. And the interviewer, and this is an interviewer in Madison, asked her if she had any second thoughts about imposing such light sentences. And her response was to laugh. She literally laughed off the question. Now, I don't think that reflects well on her at all. I mean, you can, I think that if you look at what you've done in the past and you recognize, well, maybe I whiffed it on that one, and I'm going to learn from that and not repeat it. That's a legitimate thing to do. Or if you look at it and say, well, it was a tough call, but here's why I had to do it, and that's I exercised my discretion in a way that was called for by the law and the facts. You explain that, but to laugh off the question, oh my Lord, that's just ridiculous.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the Corey Hess story this morning. I know there's a backstory to it. Again, we were told you were just on Zoom and there was a call in to a Patriot group, and you weren't even there when the guy they're all worried about was speaking. You had no contact with him. This kind of. Could you talk about that story a little bit? What's the truth behind that story?
Yeah, it is a sadly boring truth. So I was invited to make a Zoom call to this group to talk about the campaign and my view of the Constitution and the role of the court. And so I did so. And that was it. And again, this guy was speaking before me, but I have no association with him. I don't really know him. I've heard the name before, but I don't think I've ever met him. And he certainly, without question, does not speak for me. So I'm curious about how this becomes an actual newspaper story. I mean, is it the case that as I drive down the street and pass various people speaking, that somehow or other I'm responsible for what they're saying? I mean, this is, I don't even understand the logic of the story. I have no connection with this guy. And I was simply asked to address the people there, and I did it. Now, if the standard is going to be that you can't address a group of people unless you subscribe to every thought that every other speaker expresses, I don't know how that's supposed to work in a free and open society. And I don't understand how it's supposed to work when we have ideas that we are presenting as responsible, and we're talking about how you accurately encounter the world within our justice system and how our Constitution works. And if the standard is going to be, if there's anyone else in that who addresses that same group of people, then you have to buy into everything that they say. I don't know how that works as a matter of logic, even.
So Justice Kelly, they're all over that story, but they won't report the fact that two named people are on the record on audio and video alleging that Janet used the N-word.
Yeah. Well, and I think this tells you a lot about the media and what they're actually about and what they want to accomplish.
They'll turn over every stone, every pebble, and when they can't find something, they'll make things up, they'll exaggerate, yet they won't at all look into really obvious, really true stories about Janet. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting.
Look at the Jennifer Doral and what they did to her son. They had 2 unnamed sources that made, accusations at best. They maybe saw something happen, but they couldn't actually pin down and provide any kind of evidence whatsoever that her son did anything wrong. But yet the Journal Sentinel wrote up that hack piece article, probably, I don't know, Jessica, maybe argue with me, but I think one of the worst pieces of journalism I've ever seen.
It's right up there, no question about it. Because, Michael Doro is a teenager. He's a private citizen. He's not running for office. They had anonymous sourcing. He's never been publicly named a suspect in the fentanyl death they're writing about, never been arrested, never been charged. There's just nothing there other than a couple anonymous people talking to Dan Bice. And yet, once again, I just want to say, when it comes to the physical abuse allegations against Janet Protasewicz, we have 2 named sources who say they are direct eyewitnesses. And we have 4 corroborative sources. The corroborating sources say they were told about the alleged abuse years ago by either the stepson, Michael Madden, or his father, Judge Patrick Madden, literally speaking from the grave. So the other night, we spoke to a woman in Arizona. Unfortunately, didn't want her name printed, but we know who she is. She's tied to a prominent business executive. I'll just say that. And she told us that Judge Madden told her that Janet allegedly slapped him around and was physically and mentally abusive. So we have all of this corroborating evidence. We've got name sources. You contrast that, like Jim said, to something like the Jennifer Doro son story and how they're all over one, not over the other. And I think that's when you start to see the bias, the evidence, frankly, of bias. And Justice Kelly, you had said that shows you what the media are all about and what they want to accomplish. What did you mean by that? What do you think the media are all about? What do you think they're trying to accomplish?
Well, I look at the way they cover Janet and the way they cover me, and they go out of their way to write fawning pieces about her, and they go out of their way to make ludicrous pseudo connections with others to me so that they can write negative stories about me. So obviously they have made their choice about who they want to be on the Supreme Court. And so they are skewing their coverage of the race to accomplish their personal desires through their so-called reporting. I think that's irresponsible, but it's clear what they want to accomplish.
Well, and along those lines, they recently just called Scott Presler a violent revolutionary, which is so ridiculous. I know Scott, and he is the nicest. He's the most kind guy you'll ever meet. He's very compassionate. He's very positive and upbeat, but they're attacking him because he's crisscrossing the state of Wisconsin and doing the Lord's work basically right now. He is getting Wisconsinites registered, voting early. He's lifting the spirits of county parties all over, of grassroots organizers everywhere. He's not getting paid. And I believe he is very successful right now. There's postcard campaigns. He's going to be coming to Ozaukee County again in a couple of days, and we're going to be doing a whole bunch of door knocking and fun stuff. So if you're around, let me know. We got a lot of work to do. But they're going after him, and they're attacking him as a violent revolutionary, then attaching you to him like it's a whole bunch of January 6th election deniers. They just go to these crazy dramatic extremes. Yeah. And it's laughable. It's laughable if you know Scott. If you go on his social media page where he's like, I'm just so gosh darn excited. The nicest guy. But when that's how you know we are right where we need to be, because they're bringing out all their guns right now. So we must be right over the target. You must be right over the target right now. They know that something is happening. They sense the shift. There's been a change. There's a lot more optimism. It's a whole mood shift, and I think that we've got the wind at our back. We've just got to get the votes out, and I think we can win this, and they know it too. And that's why they're attacking extra malice right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, Scott and I are of different generations, and so I first met him when he came out to Wisconsin, and I didn't really know anything about him before. But here's what I found. I found an extraordinarily generous heart. I found a man who has a passion for the rule of law, for our Constitution, and for the liberties that it protects. And the man has been just unfailing in his generosity in supporting our campaign and helping us out and giving of himself as he goes around the state of Wisconsin. And as you say, he's motivating people. He's getting them excited. He's reminding them of their responsibility to take part in elections as they come. And I admire that.
Yeah.
I think that's just remarkable. And then for the press to come along with a scowl on their face, and I don't have any idea about what they're talking about when they describe him in that fashion. But boy, it's not the guy that I met. Yeah, I mean, it's just I have no idea how that connects to him. But like I said, it's just that's not the guy I met, and that's not the guy I see going around the state of Wisconsin. I've been immensely encouraged by the enthusiasm that he has brought to Wisconsin. I'm incredibly grateful for it.
They bring the Hollywood glitterati and Julie Louise Dreyfus, and we have ordinary, regular people. That just says everything. They are not. She is not for the little guy. She is an elitist, and you're for the little guy. So, and that's the fact. That's the truth.
Justice Kelly in the comment thread. Or sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing. That is the truth.
In the comment thread a while back, like someone basically said, how are you going to win this? Like, what's the strategy? Obviously, people were pretty demoralized by the results of the governor's election. You know, by people getting outspent, the results of the attorney general's race. Obviously, Ron Johnson got through, which was, people were very happy about. How are you going to win this? How are you going to get the Wow County totals back up? What's the strategy?
Yeah, so it's twofold. Obviously, the fundraising we've been doing so that we can get our ads out to make sure that everyone has the information that they need to have to make an informed choice on April 4th, or at least sometime no later than 8 p.m. on April 4th. But then beyond that, it's the personal touch. And I think that is so powerful in an environment in which we are just saturated with media. So, all the money that's been coming in to support my opponent, that buys you ads, but that's all it buys you. I know my opponent wants to hide behind slickly produced ads, but after a while, people start ignoring those. But you know what they don't ignore? The personal touch. Someone comes to you and says, someone someone you respect, comes to you and says, I've got a couple of things I'd like to share with you. I think they're important. That sticks with you. And when they tell you what's at stake in this election, that it's the rule of law or it's the rule of Janet, it's whether we keep our Constitution or Janet becomes the reference point and touchstone for what liberties you can have. When you explain those consequences to them, that sticks with them. That's the sort of thing that stays with you for days and weeks even. And I think that that's what's going to make the difference in this election. It's not going to be the overwhelming deluge of ads that Janet is putting on the air. It's going to be regular Wisconsinites going to friends and family and colleagues and saying, I've got a few things I'd like to share with you. I think they're important.
So,
and then that's going to make the difference.
Justice Kelly, that's kind of a good segue. We wanted to go a little bit lighter. We thought it would be interesting just to learn a little bit more about you, and introduce you, as a human being to the people listening. So we wanted to just talk for a little bit about just different things in your background. I wanted to know, first of all, more about, you said your dad was a cowboy. Like, what was that
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, that's right. So, so my dad, he was actually born in New Jersey, and when he graduated high school, he joined the Navy, did a tour, but he'd always wanted to be a man of the West. And so, when his tour in the Navy was up, he moved out to Wyoming, and he worked as a cowboy, honest to God, on the horseback, 30-30 in the saddle scabbard, out riding the range and rounding up cattle, a cowboy. And he loved that. So he worked on ranches in Wyoming, Colorado, and eventually California, and that's where he met my mom. And so and that was always one of his favorite times of his life, and he always wanted to go back, possibly to being a cowboy again. So, we eventually moved from California to Colorado. So that he could buy a ranch. Now, he never got around to being able to do that. But that was his sensibility, and it was this straightforward, down to earth kind of guy that you just love and respect. And I sure loved my dad, and I respected him an awful lot. And if I could say this, if it doesn't depart too far from the segment we're doing, that's actually one of the reasons why I'm so bothered by the lies that Janet's telling about me. Because when we grew up, we didn't have a whole heck of a lot in our family. I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and my mom and dad had to work really hard to make the dollars stretch from one week to the next. And when I was a teenager, one day my dad sat me down, and he said, "Now, Dan, when I'm done with this life, I'm not going to have a whole lot to leave you, but I'll make you this promise. I'll leave you a good name." Now, a year after I graduated law school, his comments came to pass. And he didn't have a lot to leave me, a couple of cufflinks and a broken pocket watch, but he left me a good name. And I've treasured that my whole life, and it's been my goal to hand down my good name to my children. And so I get angry when there's someone like a Janet Protasewicz out there lying about me and trying to trash my father's legacy. That makes me furious. And it's because my dad taught me the value of character in a person. And he told me that your name is everything. And I believe him. It was a good lesson to learn. And I've lived my life according to that lesson ever since.
I love that.
Yeah,
That
that's
just my heart. That's how many children do you have?
We have 5, and Scarlett, I think we might have the same mix. So I have 1 son and 4 daughters. My son is the oldest, and then the 4 daughters after. How's that compared to yours?
My son is my oldest, and I have 4 daughters. Yep.
All right. So that's been a great mix for us. And my son has been a terrific older brother to his sisters. They just adore him. But they're now ours are probably a little bit ahead of yours in age. So my son's 28, and then it goes all the way down to 16. So we are grandparent eligible. My son is married to a wonderful young lady, and but no grandchildren yet. And that's becoming a more of a pointed conversation from my wife. So the hints are becoming a little bit more obvious.
She's ready for the grandbabies.
She really is. Yep. She misses having babies around.
Oh.
Well,
It's
what
gonna
are
be
what
an
are you?
explosion. When it happens, it's going to be an explosion, but it'll be wonderful.
I'm looking forward
Justice-
to it. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
No, I'm sorry. I heard, rumor has it that you're quite the car guru, and I was just wondering, what is your favorite car and why?
Oh my goodness. Yes, I love cars. I've loved cars since I was a kid. This is one of the things that I did with my dad and my older brother. Going back, we didn't have a whole lot. So we had to work on our own cars just to keep them on the road. So I learned a whole lot about car repair and maintenance. And my dad was also a car enthusiast, so we would always go to the old car shows. And it was just a ton of fun. So now, as far as favorite cars go, there's, I guess you have to divide them up into tranches. So there's the ultimate out of reach. If you had just, scads of money, you didn't know what to do with, what would you buy? And on that, probably a Ferrari California. That I think is one of the most beautiful cars ever made. I mean, the lines on it are just absolutely classic. I guess the best description is swoopy. So it's just lovely to look at. And that Ferrari tune engine, oh my goodness, it is just a beautiful sound. It's nearly like music. And so I just think that would be a ton of fun. Now, I fell in love with Ferraris. You'll probably laugh at me. When I was a kid, do you remember the show Magnum PI?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so Tom Selleck, he's the PI, and he drove that beautiful Ferrari 308 GTS. And I just, every week, Magnum PI would come on, and I'm there for the car. I want to see the Ferrari. And it wasn't until years later that I learned something kind of interesting actually about that show. So, it's set in Hawaii, so there's that estate, and, Tom Selleck plays a guy that is just kind of a hanger-on the estate who lives in mortal fear of the Doberman Pinschers. It turns out the estate is his, those dogs were his, and so was the Ferrari 308.
Oh,
So I just love that whole thing. So,
wow.
but if you get down to a more, kind of affordable kind of car, there's one that's probably just out of reach, but it's a Morgan. It's a 2-seat roadster, and it is just gorgeous. Classic roadster lines, beautiful tuned engine, just sounds wonderful. And I've always loved the Roadster just as a concept of a car. So at one time, I owned a Triumph Spitfire, which is also a Roadster, a car that tried to kill me a couple of times, and yet I kept going back to it. But it was just a ton of fun to drive. And driving a car with the top down, the wind in your hair, it's just a ton of fun. So now those would be my favorite. But I just get excited about seeing interesting and neat cars. So I like some of the retro design that has been GM has been doing and Ford has been doing. The retro Camaro looks great. The Dodge Challenger, when they developed the retro model, that's a great design they had there. And of course, the Ford Mustang retro is, just picking up on some great design cues. So just a ton of fun to look at and enjoy. And then you get down to the workaday world of the cars that you can actually afford to drive. And so I've been enjoying my Ford Fusion Sport. It's a fun car to drive. I mean, nice performance, great suspension, kind of impressive engine. It's a twin turbo V6, puts out 325 horsepower, which is pretty darn good given the size of the car that it is. And so now the one downside though of all of these cars is they are so technologically advanced that the only thing that I can really do with them is drive them. I mean, there's no maintenance that I can do. I mean, you got to have a whole computer system just to tune them. So that's the one downside, but I still, I love the old cars because you can actually get your hands dirty and taking care of them.
I have a
Very
couple
good.
sort of, speed round questions. What's your favorite movie?
Henry V, Kenneth Branagh production. Kenneth Branagh is just a wildly talented actor.
Yeah, he is.
And I've never seen anyone do Shakespeare half as well as Kenneth Branagh. And the way that he did Henry V was spectacular. And the St. Crispin's Day speech still gives me chills. Just gorgeous.
What's your favorite band or music group?
So that changes depending on mood. So I grew up with country music because that's my dad loved. And so, when the world looks like it's out of control and life is hectic and, you just want to come away, I always go back to the country beats and chords. And I love Lady Antebellum, just a spectacular group. Hillary's got a beautiful, beautiful voice. And that's fantastic. I still have a weakness, though, for 70s music. I know we're supposed to not like music from that era, but I still love the Moody Blues. I think they're fantastic. And even, this gets dangerously close to disco, which we must not approve of. But the Bee Gees were just a ton of fun.
Yeah. So someone on the comment thread said, and I was thinking this in my head too, that your comments on your dad are so incredibly moving. They really introduce you to people in a very human way that I think people will connect with.
Yeah.
And wouldn't that be a great closing television ad for you?
Well, no, that's an interesting idea.
I agree.
I'll have to.
I agree. It was
thank
really
you.
touching. Yeah.
It did. Yeah, that should be a closing ad for you. That was a really touching story, and I think people will connect with you on another level. So
People need
Well,
an
thank you so much
emotional
for saying that.
connection. Yeah, they need an emotional connection. And I think everyone in the comment thread was very moved by that. What was your father's name?
Edward. So he was known to his friends as Eddie or EJ. So his middle name was John. So I grew up with him being called Ed, Eddie, or EJ. But to me,
Did you grow up in
always
Wisconsin?
Dad. No, so I was born actually in Santa Barbara, and we moved when I was young to Colorado. So I did most of my grown-up years in Colorado. I came to Wisconsin when I was 18 to study at Carroll College, and and it was and I chose Carroll because of some really practical considerations. So I'd never been to Wisconsin before. I didn't know a soul here. But I knew that if I was going to be able to attend college, it would be based on my savings, what I could earn during college, and whatever scholarships that I could get. So one day, a recruiter from Carroll College came out and called me up, said she wanted to meet with me. So I went to meet with her. She made a great case for Carroll, and then the kicker was this: she laid out the expenses and said, here are the kind of scholarships that would be available to you. And I looked at that, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can actually afford that. And so I came out to Wisconsin, having never been here before. So it was just kind of an adventure. And one of the things she told me was that there's great fishing in Wisconsin. I love fishing. I grew up fishing the mountain streams of the Rockies for trout. And I came out here, and I came out a little bit early because I wanted to do some fishing before study started. So the very first day I arrived, I was at a park in Waukesha County on a lake, and it was a gorgeous weekend. And apparently the rest of Wisconsin thought so too, because they were all there. It was crowded, and the campsite was full. But through one thing and another, I ended up sharing a campsite with a young family from Sheboygan Falls. And they were the most generous, welcoming, warm people you would ever hope to meet. And they're remarkable. They had me over to their campfire. They shared dinner with me, took me sailing the next day. They basically spent a long weekend teaching me what it is to be a Wisconsinite. And I learned from them that Wisconsinites are the people of the open hand and generous heart. And I fell in love with them that first day. And that's what Wisconsinites have been for me now for 40 years. They're still the same. I know that we can get divided along political lines and all of that. But I just had an experience oh boy, it was probably, I guess it was a year ago, I guess it was, that just reconfirmed me all over again that this is who Wisconsinites are. So one of my daughters lives in Madison, and she had been home to visit. It was the middle of the winter, and she was driving back to her apartment in Madison, and the roads were bad, and she slid off the road. And fortunately, it was just into a farmer's field. So she was in rural Dane County, and there she was, the car stuck. And so she calls me, what do I do, Dad? And so we're talking, and every once in a while, she she would put the phone down, and I would hear, "Oh no, thanks, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm talking to my dad. Everything's fine." And then we'd start talking again, and then a couple minutes later, "Oh yeah, thanks, I'm fine. It's all good." And people were just pulling over just to make sure she's okay. They didn't know her from Adam, had no idea who she was. But here are the Wisconsinites in rural Dane County who are making sure that their fellow Wisconsinites are okay. And I loved that. And it reconfirmed for me all over again that Wisconsinites are the people of the open hand and generous heart.
Justice Kelly, listening to you talk, I feel like most Wisconsinites haven't gotten to see the side of you like we just all did. And I blame that honestly on the warped media filter and on all of these, twisted ads that we see constantly. But I would just ask people to contrast right now, like the caricature of you that gets through the warped media filter with the person we just heard from. It's a fairly remarkable contrast. And I just hope that a lot of people watch this podcast so that Wisconsinites are introduced to who you really are.
Yeah.
Well, and I thank you for that opportunity to do that. I mean, I love talking about this stuff because, for me, this, the personal relationship is everything. And so I love living here. I love living amongst an excellent people. They've been a blessing to us this whole time. And frankly, it's one of the reasons why it was such an honor and a privilege to serve on the Supreme Court. Because the way I understand this relationship is the people of Wisconsin are the bosses, and those of us in state government are the servants. And that's a relationship, that is extraordinarily special. And so I understood that I had the greatest bosses a guy could ask for. And that's what made it a privilege. And so I enjoyed every moment of serving on the court. And should they invite me back, I would look forward to that, enjoy it once again.
What made you fall in love with the law? What made you decide that you wanted to be a lawyer?
Well, I was in 7th grade when I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. And,
Wow.
I think it was a couple of things. One, my mom and dad instilled in me and my siblings a deep sense of justice. Just this understanding. And it wasn't like, they sat down and gave lessons, but I watched how they lived their lives and I listened to the things that they talked about. And they understood the importance of the equal dignity of all human beings, and how the law protects that dignity in each one, so that we can live together in society in peace and with the prospect of prosperity. So I watched them live that out every day, and so I think that's one part of it. I think the other part was I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. And boy, howdy, do you make sure that you have justice when there is,
Yes.
when the pumpkin pie is being apportioned. You want to make sure everyone gets that, the just size piece of pie. So, there is, so I kind of grew up with it. And kind of, one of the remarkable things to me, and I was just so grateful for, I didn't know this until after my dad died, but apparently, he had always hoped that I would be a lawyer. And, my parents were really careful to not try to push any of the kids in a particular direction. They always told us, do something honorable, work hard. We would be proud of you, whatever it is that you choose. But for whatever reason, my dad harbored a hope that I'd be a lawyer. but I didn't know that until he was gone.
Yeah.
And I was so I was especially pleased when I learned that he at least lived long enough that I graduated law school before he died. And he told me how proud he was of me, and I thought that was in part just that's parent talk. And then I learned from my mom later about that dream he had harbored, and so that just made it mean a whole lot more to me.
And he would be proud of you today because the way that you have handled yourself as a jurist when you were on the Supreme Court and the way that you are handling yourself during this campaign is honorable and decent. And I see every time I see you speak, I see that. And the debate was very clarifying to me. You behaved in a way that was honorable, decent. You showed that you had a true understanding of your role and what you're running for and what your role would be when you are successfully back on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And I just really appreciated that. And I so appreciate that you are a man of character, you are a man of your word, and that you refuse to get into the mud and start mudslinging. I think, boy, would this country be better if more people that are running for office as actual politicians, if they would return to a more civil time where we could debate ideas and not just try and ruin people and wreck people. It's so wrong. And I really appreciate you. And I think you're a very honorable man. And I agree with the comment right here. There's someone, Alan Crow said, just like we brought in the SEAL with Van Orden, we need to send in the cowboy to Wisconsin.
I like that. I like that a lot.
That's great.
That's well, Scarlett, thank you so much for saying that. That is most kind of you, and that is surely a blessing to me. Thank you.
Maybe we could conclude here, Justice Kelly, by talking about ways that people can get involved.
Yeah. So there are a number of different ways, and if you go to my campaign website, justicedanielkelly.com, you can sign up to help there. And so that could involve putting up yard signs, passing out literature, knocking on doors, making phone calls, writing postcards. I love the idea of postcards. I mean, we spend a whole lot of money on these very slick, glossy flyers. And people have learned how to recognize the dimensions of them. So they see that, and, you might get a couple seconds of attention as they walk it over to the garbage can. But that's about it. But with these handwritten postcards, those are wonderful because you see the handwriting, and you're like, well, I got to know what this says, and you read it all the way through, and you get to the end, and you're like, oh, it's politics. But you've read it by then, and it's because of the personal touch. There's something about that conveys the idea somebody sat down with a pen in their hand, and they took the time to write this out to you specifically. And so I think the postcards are just a tremendous idea. And then beyond that, in this electronic age, we all have, contact databases, all the people that and send emails to, and their phone numbers and all that. And so it's pretty easy to send out emails to folks that send them texts, and it doesn't take long to do. So those are great ways of helping out as well. So there's a bunch of different ways, and if people are willing to help out in this effort, I'd be sure appreciative of that.
Justice Kelly, I know this is going to be kind of a wrench in this, I'm going to wrench it back to, a topic that's less comfortable. But I was thinking as we were all talking that it's interesting that we didn't ask any questions about abortion, because obviously if this were a mainstream media podcast, literally, 98% of it would have been. Yeah. So I just wanted to ask one question on that, though, for the people who care about that issue. What is the biggest misconception about you when it comes to abortion? That's the only question I'm really going to ask on it.
Yeah, it's a great question, though. The biggest conception is that they know how I will rule on any case that comes before the court on that question, and they don't. And frankly, I don't, because I haven't seen the case yet. So the commitment of a justice is to rule according to the law. And I think and this is actually a really good way of illustrating the difference between a legal institution like the court and a political institution like the legislature. So the question doesn't get posed to those of us in the court the same way it gets posed to those in the legislature. So in the legislature, the question will come up and it'll be something like this: shall there or shall there not be abortion in the state of Wisconsin? Or shall there or shall there not be certain exceptions to an abortion ban in the state of Wisconsin? So that's a prudential question. It's a political question, and legislators, they have their debates and their conversations, and they come to a conclusion, and then they pass a law. Now, in the courts, it doesn't come to us like that. There will never be a question presented to us that says, shall there or shall there not be abortion in the state of Wisconsin? That's just not how questions come. So I think a good example of that is the lawsuit filed by Attorney General Call. So I looked at the pleadings when the case was first filed, and the pleadings could have changed. You can amend those. And I haven't looked at them since then, so I don't know if they've been amended. But when the lawsuit was filed, the question presented to the court was this. There's a 1985 statute that addresses abortion as well. So the question is, did the 1985 statute impliedly repeal the 1849 statute? So that sounds a whole lot different from the type of question that gets presented to the legislature. So this is a question of statutory construction. It has nothing to do with whether the jurists want abortion bans or not, whether they want exceptions to an abortion ban or not. It is simply a matter of statutory construction, and we've got rules about how to do that. And the responsibility of the court is to apply those rules in the same way they do on that question as they do in every other question. And so, it's just not the questioners are not presented in anything like the same posture. And so the work of the court, if you're going to be a faithful jurist, if you're going to apply the law as it exists without regard to your personal views and politics, then you need to wait for a case to come to you, see what the argument is, and then you apply the legal principles that we always use to decide cases. So I think that's the biggest misconception, is that someone would know how I would rule in a case that has not yet been presented to me.
Good
Very
concluding answer there.
I think that was a great way to end this. Justice Kelly,
Mhm.
really appreciate you coming on. I think it was really important. I mean, I know I got to really know you. I've met you once. I've never really gotten to know you. And again, kind of like we talked about, your story isn't really out there. And so I hope that our listeners, this video will be shared and a lot of people will watch it, and people will get to know you. And hopefully, those 10% or so roughly that are undecided will see it. And that might make the difference in this race. So good luck to you in 2 weeks.
Splendid.
Thank you,
so
sir.
much.
Thank you.
Oh my
for
goodness.
coming on.
Thank
you.
you. I really appreciate this opportunity. This has been a most enjoyable conversation, so I really appreciate this.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good night. Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
You as well. Talk to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye. Wow.
Wow. That was great.
That was
I have
great.
to-
I feel
I
good.
have-
That was great.
I feel so good, and I feel like I know him better. And he's a great storyteller. I think we could have just asked so many more questions, and he just, I don't know. He's definitely. I was already voting for him, and now I sincerely like him. I think he's a very good and decent person, and we would be lucky to have him back on the
I
scene.
really think he would be wise to do that closing ad with the father. And so when we were talking about, this podcast and what to ask him, and when I was like, let's ask about his bio, I guess it comes from my training as a feature writer at times, right? And I teach feature writing as part of what I do. And, you want to humanize people and pull out their life story. And then when he was talking, it really drove home to me that I think a lot of people really haven't been introduced to the real Dan Kelly. And it's shocking to me to compare what we just saw and heard to the version of him in like the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel or whatever.
Yeah, they're not
Just don't
going
even
to
match.
ask those questions because they don't want to humanize him. And then I think for those of us on the right, conservatives, I think sometimes we're a little, I'm guilty of it too, hair on fire. It's the end of the world, the end, like all these, we're so concerned, legitimately concerned about the future of our state that we don't pause to, find out, well, who are you? Like, what are you about? And I think it's wise to do that because people want to vote for someone that inspires them, that they can believe in, that you just feel like he's a Wisconsinite. He gets us, and I trust him. And she just, watching the debate, I just watched it twice today. She's shrill, she's cold, she's not warm, she's not likable. And I think sometimes there are leftists, there's opponents where you think, boy, that's going to be a hard candidate to beat. They're very likable. She is not likable. I think that those polls are accurate. This race right now is so close, and we just have to get out. We have to get our friends out, our family out. We've got to vote. And we'd really lose, not only because we'd have Janet Prolasewicz. Am I saying her last name right? I just think of witch, but but I think that she doesn't have a good temperament. She's not a good person, and I think that she looks at this like a political position. But he's a good man, and we would be lucky to have him.
Jessica, were there any answers that he gave tonight that surprised you?
Wow. No, but I understand a lot better why he, didn't, for example, go after Janet on our stories in the debate. He did tonight say they're credible. He hopes there's an investigation. So, he talked about it more strongly than he has anywhere. And I think that it should drive some news headlines on that topic. But I understood, I think, more clearly, his strategy or it's not really a strategy, I guess. It's just who he is. His principled, decision to keep the discussion on the judicial, process and the Constitution and all of that. And I think it actually does link back to his dad.
Yeah.
I think when he's making decisions about anything he's going to say or do, it struck me that he's always thinking about that line from his dad about the name that he'll leave his kids. And so he conducts himself, along those lines. And I guess I just understood it better.
And, in the debate, it really explains that he was very aggressive in defending his name. And he was very offended by the lies that she had told. And I saw him extremely passionate in those discussions and now I understand why, that his name, is everything. That reminds me a lot of my dad. I'm sure everyone listening, my dad was old school like that. Your name is everything. It's all you have. And your family, your family is everything, and your legacy. And it really just hit home for me. And I really liked what he said about how he views himself as a public servant. And I'm reminded of a story that I read in one of Peggy Noonan's books about Ronald Reagan. And that Ronald Reagan, on his ranch, there's a cabinet, and the warranty is on display. And so when you ask why, they'll show you why. Because what he took pride in the fact that he had installed the cabinet himself. And when he filled out for the warranty, as he was president of the United States of America, one of the line was, "Who's your employer?" And Ronald Reagan had wrote, who are the people of the United States of America, and his job title was public servant. So as president of the free world, he never saw himself the way that Joe Biden sees himself, the way that Obama has seen himself, as pretty much king of the world. He saw himself as a public servant, and that was very Reagan-esque to me and very endearing.
So
Jim, what
perhaps,
surprise? Or
well, I was going to say, so perhaps, we've had this conflict, and I know there's a lot of arguments and frustration with his campaign and lack of aggressiveness and taking it to Janet, because I think most believe that that's really necessary to win this race. But maybe a campaign strategy should have been, if they were going to play him, if he was going to play this way and not get in the mud with Janet, maybe they should have done some more special, human interest stories on him, have him out there telling his story, who he is, where he comes from, because maybe that would have been the strategy that would have rose him above Janet's negative ads.
Well, if anyone's listening out there that works for his campaign, I think, I think that this is the way that's the way we should end it over the last 2 weeks. And if anyone's going to be interviewing him, which I would imagine they were on 1130 or anywhere else, I would suggest that when they have a large audience, that they ask these similar questions. I think that it would be very good.
And I would suggest people that are watching, I'm sorry, Jessica, people that are watching,
no, go ahead.
I think a big way that we can support him, first of all, to donate money to him, you can go justicedanielkelly.com, and you can donate directly to his site. I don't think he was comfortable in discussing that, but I'm going to bring it up. Also, if you want to help Dan Kelly, I really think sharing this podcast, share it on your page, share it on social, send it out in emails, get those undecided voters to see the real Dan Kelly. And I'm telling you, that very well could be the thing that tips the 2 points that he needs in this race.
I mean, so I was thinking about, what we're going to write out of this podcast. And I'd like to do 2 stories, because I really think it needs to be both. So one, I'd like to do the human story about the father, where the story focuses on that. I'd like to ask his campaign if they can provide a photo of his father, a couple of photos of them, growing up. And
as a
I'd
cowboy?
like to tell.
Can you imagine a picture of him on a horse as a cowboy?
Yeah, we got to see him as a cowboy.
Yep.
But I'd like to see what he looks like. I'd like to do a feature approach and tell that story in print and with photos, and then embed this video so we can get that more wider play. And then secondly, I want to do a story highlighting that he did call the Janet allegations credible, and he's calling for an investigation into them. That is newsworthy. Yeah. If the media do not cover that angle, if they censor his comments, then they are proving once again their incredible bias. I've done this for 25 years, and I know what the traditional news values are. And there's no question that his comments tonight, on the allegations against Janet are the farthest he's gone on it, and are newsworthy. Like, he said some pretty strong comments about that, and the media bias. I think him calling out the media for their lack of coverage, his comments on the, sort of differences in how they're covering him, that is newsworthy.
Yeah.
And that needs to be a story. And, we'll write it. But I'm sure there's media watching this. And I'm sure a lot of them were watching it to try to trip him up or find some gotcha comment they can, use. But I would encourage them to understand that's clearly a story. So I think, Jim, we should do both.
I don't know anyone better to do a human interest story than you, Jessica. You're great at it. And I know that you'll do a good job. Yeah.
Well, his story was incredible. And the way he speaks is really interesting. And someone said in the comment thread that he could be a podcast host. Yeah. I mean, he's an old-fashioned storyteller. And
yes.
some interview subjects are very difficult to get emotion out of, or anecdotes or stories, but not him. I mean, you barely need to prompt him.
Jessica,
So-
do you think Steve Schuster is watching tonight?
Oh, sure. But, he's only interested in finding some line and, to attack you or me or
Right. Falsely
whatever.
accused me of being on Dan Kelly's campaign or whatever.
Whatever. So, I mean, we approach our journalism using traditional journalistic techniques. If we can't, provide some documentation for things, if we can't find a credible source, we can't find a second source, a corroborative source, we don't go with stories. We approach the news with journalistic techniques. I mean, that is how we do our reporting. Jim, you're a former police officer. What do police officers do? They have to verify facts, or they can't take it to the DA and the DA can't make a case. And I know you approach everything we do journalistically like that. And I've learned a lot from your techniques in investigation and just how thorough you are. And I remember we were sitting in Michael Madden's house and we were interviewing him, the stepson, and Jim kept asking for, corroboration and who else has heard this and like, did he ever write anything? And just the painstaking way that you were going about, attempting to see what corroboration existed. And we now have, 6 witnesses total who are alleging this against Janet.
But
I don't know, I'm
let
just
me
saying that.
Let me interject. I think that's so incredibly important. I think that's what separates us from Main Street Media, Journal Sentinel, is that I would never have written it. It would have made me sick to falsely accuse anyone of some of these things that are being alleged are horrific. And my worst nightmare would be if we ever found out we falsely wrote these stories. That's why it was important that we didn't just go with one source, that we went with multiple sources, both named and unnamed, that could collaborate. That's everything to me. That speaks to our credibility. That's why we have followers. That's why we have readers. And that's why the left is so, I think, frustrated, because they are unable to take us out.
I know. And her threat to sue you, and of course she has to say something like that, because what else is she going to say? I thought the story that the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel did was just, it was
Well,
not good.
it wasn't good for Janet. Honestly, I mean, I think her entire game the last week has been to prevent our stories from leaping into the liberal media. And she has relied on the fact that they, I'm sorry, but they are in some cases very biased. And so, for example, you had the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel that never revealed that a second source, John Eyre, who's a self-described liberal, who's a former restaurant and bar owner in Milwaukee, is not related to the Madden family, that he also alleges he heard her use the N-word racial slur, and a racial slur to refer to Hispanics. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel left that out. And then they're reporting it's just Michael Madden alleging it. And then Janet has this quote focusing on Michael Madden, trying to discredit him. I thought that was really dishonest. And they know John Eyre existed because we already reported that. We mentioned the degree of corroboration, number of witnesses in our statement we gave them, and they didn't print all of it. And after their story, I wrote them and I said, you owe it to readers to tell them it's not just Michael Madden saying this about the racial slurs. There is this second witness, and he's not even a member of that family. And, they just, Bice wrote back something like, well, we focus on our own reporting. I said, well, then I was thinking, well, your own reporting isn't good enough, because you're not doing as good of reporting as we're doing. Mm-hmm. And yet, what do they want to do? They want to malign us and so forth and so on, and, attack and whatever. We expect it, right? We expect it. This stuff always happens this way. Phase 1 is the media. They ignore our stories for as long as they can. Double standard, they would cover the conservative and have much harder. Phase 2 is they can't ignore it anymore, because our reach actually is bigger than they think, spreads around. A lot of people see it, people write them. Eventually the candidate gets asked about it. They can't ignore it. So then they go into phase 2, which is to undermine the story. They twist it, they lie about it, as they did with some of the pro numbers. They try to go at, us to undermine the credibility of the source. And that's the phase we're in right now. I mean, that's the phase we're in right now. So they offer incomplete information to the readers. They don't call Janet on some of the just obviously, not true things that her campaign is saying. We sent to the Wisconsin Law Journal a list, like a laundry list of requests for retractions and clarification and things like that. And the reporter is just literally refusing to do it. I mean, it's things as basic as he didn't even get right, like what I do at UW Milwaukee. Like he didn't even get that right, and he won't correct that. Like, I mean, and that's a small point, but it shows you the incredible refusal to just be honest to the public when you won't even correct something like that. You double down on that. We go on the faculty website, and correct it. Or see it for yourself.
I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't know how they sleep at night. I don't know how they can't just be fair or a little, just even the attempt. I think there used to be the attempt at fairness. Now there's no attempt. They're not even trying. It's just, since 2016 in particular, I think it's just the gloves are off. They have a side. It's not just that they're gatekeeping and they're keeping stories. They are acting as if they are part of Janet's campaign. They function that way. They're shielding her. They're protecting her. They're writing stories that are favorable to her. And the only way that to get the story out that you all worked so hard on was they had to preface it by, she's saying it's all just a bunch of lies and she's going to threaten to sue.
Yeah, but then she took that back. Within hours, they walked that back. And now she's saying, I'm not going to sue anybody. And the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel has not reported that. So I wrote them and said, okay, you did this story saying she's going, maybe think about suing people. And then a couple hours later, she walks it back and you're not telling readers that she's now saying she's not suing anyone. And it was your obligation to the readers to be sort of honest to the readers through totality of the information. Like it can be dishonest through omission. And I know, Jim, you were telling me you were kind of shocked. I mean, I've been seeing this for a long time, but you were telling me you were shocked to see how the media actually works.
Thanks for bringing that up. I want to talk about that a little bit because, Jessica, you've been brought up in this, but for me being relatively new, something that I think most people don't realize how the media in Wisconsin works is right now we've obviously dropped these bombshells. And we've got video interviews of multiple people now and are on audio. And so now what the trick is, the gig that the media, the left media wants to do is they want to demonize us. They want to make us appear uncredible. So you'll see in this piece by the Daily Reporter, they're trying to say that I actively campaign for Dan Kelly. And maybe I should ask Dan Kelly that, but I have never campaigned for Dan Kelly. I don't even have a yard sign in my yard for Dan Kelly. No bumper stickers. I've never coordinated with the campaign, nothing. But yet they're out there now. They're saying Pivo Varchek has coordinating with the campaign because I put a Facebook post once looking for police officers willing to publicly endorse Dan Kelly. Why? Because we were considering writing an endorsement. And being a former cop, I thought it'd be a good idea to speak with other cops, see if other cops want to go on the record as to why they endorse Dan Kelly, get the criminal justice angle to it. And yet we have now these journalists trying to pin me as being a active, a campaigner for Dan Kelly on his campaign. And why? So now they can discredit that. And now other news sources, let's say Journal Sentinel wants to write an article tomorrow about this, they can say Pivovarchuk, who's a known Dan Kelly campaigner, and his website said this. And what they do is they then link to the Daily Reporter story that has the accusation that I am a Dan Kelly campaigner. That's how the media works, and that's how they take us down.
I've discovered that the hard way, in my own small way, with the recall, with running for school board. My husband and I were shocked to learn how things really work. The lies that they tell about you, and then they, just like you said, they'll just link to those same lies. The things that they would say about me, about Amber, my friend Amber Schrader, what they would say about what we were doing with the recall, even my connections to Rebecca Kleefisch. I was practically running her whole campaign. I mean, I was essentially in charge of the whole Kleefisch campaign at some point, which was ridiculous. But they took, and then we're all taking dark money, don't you know? We're all really rich secretly. There's some secret, I'm sure you both are connected to that secret dark money somewhere, which I would love to find it. It would be great.
And where is it, Jim? Yeah. I don't think we found that yet.
Yeah, I would love to know where all the dark money is.
That's a joke.
Because I'm just always writing everything that I do. It's like I'm writing checks for. They're going out. They're not coming in. Because everything I do is because I'm passionate about, I'm passionate about liberty. I'm passionate about the state. I'm passionate about the country. And I know both of you, you sacrifice so much. You actually have full-time careers and families and kids. And this is what you're doing, on the side, though I think it takes up, it's a lot more than a side. It takes up a big chunk of your life. And
we have been up till 3 a.m. I think every night this week. We're exhausted doing this. Jessica, are you okay if we do a gentle tease on what we're working on?
Yeah, of course. Sure.
Right.
And I wanted to say one thing quickly, though, is you never even ended up doing the editorial. Like, we decided not to endorse in the race.
Right.
Just because, I don't know, we just sort of decided to get out of the endorsement game overall, like in all races, I think. We want to focus on our investigative journalism, and we really don't do much opinion work. We run columns from other people sometimes. So it was just ludicrous and laughable. Like, knowing you, Jim, you've never worked for any campaign. Like, I don't think you've ever belonged to a political party.
What's actually funny is a couple days ago on some Facebook posts, there were people trashing me, actually accusing me of hating Dan Kelly and being against Dan Kelly, remember? And I'm like, I like Dan Kelly. He's a great guy. He's smart. He would be a good judge. And so it's just ludicrous. So Jessica, I think, for the people that are still listening, I think they'll find this interesting. You and I, and I'm going to give you credit for this. You stayed dogged yesterday, and Jessica and I were running around north side of Milwaukee, and we have uncovered some really good stuff that is going to be, I think, very damning to Janet if this all comes together as we plan. I think it's going to be the third bombshell.
Wow.
Do you want to go any further with that, Jessica?
Sure. And I mean, damning to her, not because we're out trying to find something damning for her, but because the facts, I think some people will feel are damning for her. Like, I just want to say that again, like when Jim and I approach a story, when we get a tip or we find an angle, like we hit the pavement and we talk to people and we gather documents and we file open records requests and we go where the facts lead us, right? Like we're after the truth, to be honest. So the story is, well, we found out, we got a tip that I think it's the only, I want to verify this, but at least one of the only, I was told it's the only case that Janet ever argued before the state Supreme Court.
Before you go further, are we sure we want to give away details yet before?
Okay, well then maybe not. But like,
this is my concern. I wouldn't want it to.
I get it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so we won't go that far. But what we will say is, yesterday,
want to know.
Yesterday, Jim and I were literally knocking on doors all around the inner city, and at one point, Jim was ready, I think, to strangle me. He's like, I think you were having PTSD because it was your former Glendale patrolman's beat or something.
Yeah, it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Traffic's heavy. No one's stopping for stop signs or lights. They're driving all over the place. There's gunshots in the background. I did my time in Milwaukee County. I wanted to get out of there, and I was worried about my truck getting hit.
I know I was trying to call you, and you're like, we're driving around
Yeah.
doing interviews.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
have to stop for a second.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I didn't have
meanwhile,
time to even talk.
Meanwhile, I'm jumping out of the truck and knocking on doors on, Sherman Boulevard or whatever. And then but one of the people I was trying to reach then was talking to me through a Ring camera, but she wasn't at the house. So somehow she's talking to me from somewhere else.
Phone. Yeah, you can do that through
Yeah.
the phone. Uh-huh.
I didn't know you could do that, but I knew you could do that from your house. I didn't know you could do that from like somewhere else. But anyway, then we were almost ready to give up, right, Jim? Because we went to the final address on Fond du Lac Avenue, and it was this Verrata property. You couldn't get into the lobby; it was locked, and so we were about to give up. And all of a sudden, my phone rang, and people started calling us back, and so now we have the story. We're doing some final pieces on it, like we want to get video on it, and we're working on that. But we think it's a piece of Janet Prostasewicz's biography that has not been explored by the media. And I think they'll be interested in the story. Right, Jim?
Ooh,
Absolutely.
exciting.
I think this is going to be, this has a potential to be a huge story.
Good.
I
It's
think that's
defining.
all
It could
we're
be
gonna say.
defining.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Very
All right.
good.
Well, then
thanks,
we tease
guys.
that. All right. We
Yeah.
are on. Scarlett, do you have anything else you want to add? We're approaching 2 hours here. Good night.
No,
That was
Good
a
night.
great podcast.
it was a great
Um,
podcast. I feel really.
It was.
I feel
We're getting
like this
comments.
is-
Great interview. Nick
Yes.
Harris commented. She said it was the best interview she heard in a long time.
Wow.
Um,
Nice.
Share it. Share this. Mainly because I really want people to see this side of him. I think this
Yeah.
was a great interview. It hit everywhere it needed to, and then just brought it home with all of that those personal stories, that personal touch. So share it with someone who doesn't know, or someone who's just completely has the wrong idea of who he is, because all they see are those just god awful. I was getting gas and I had to run in because I was getting a car wash. And as I went in, one of the ads basically accusing him of getting rich, defending people who hurt children, which all was a lie. And then, literally got a candy bar and another ad came on. It was boom, boom. They are just they're just carpet bombing with all of these ads that are so ridiculous. I do think he's right. They're so unreal that I think I'm hoping that they're backfiring. And a lot of people don't watch TV very much these days, but I'm really glad that he got to set the record straight.
Very good.
Yeah, and this might sound, I don't know, I'm playing the gender card, but the Wow County women, Republicans need them back. There's been an erosion. Obviously, we've seen that with the Wow County women, and I think that's one reason it's important that voters hear, a candidate's story and their biography, and people connect to that, I think, and stories about your father, etc. Just understanding, who someone is, versus like the caricature in the news. I think, it appeals to men too. I'm not trying to say men don't care about that either, but do you know what I mean, Scarlett? I think
we're both Wow County moms. This story resonates. And it reminds us of our dads or our grandpas.
Not mine, but
yeah,
maybe my grandpa. Reminds me of my grandpa.
Yeah, it reminds me of my dad. It reminds me of, my father-in-law, like good, decent, like hardworking men. We're from my husband's from a very big family. I'm from a very big family. I loved what he said. Because I went to law school briefly, and I came from a very big family, and I have a bunch of kids, and he's exactly right. Your sense of justice is very high when you are competing, and we were poor too. So when McDonald's was actually like a treat, I don't know about you guys, but like going to McDonald's was like a special thing. And we'd get our French fries and we're all just like trying to be the last one with French fries so we could wave it in front of, just so you're always competing for every little thing. And I love to hear that he has a big family. He's from a big family. That he worked hard for everything he had, and that he wanted to be a lawyer since he was in 7th grade, which is
That was interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it just says a lot about someone, and versus what you hear about, Janet, which she just sounds just allegedly just a very kind of selfish person who is doing this for all the wrong reasons.
Well, I mean,
should-
the allegations.
I'm
Sorry.
We should have added, and we should have kind of concluded probably with this, is that we have asked Janet to join us to give her side of the story. We would love to have her on, and I do not believe her campaign has responded yet.
And I was going to say the allegations, I'm sure, are a piece of her story, right? It's a part of her life. We'd like to understand it better. So, right, we extended that invitation. It's an open one.
Yeah.
I don't expect to hear back because, largely because she really hasn't done a lot of debates, quite honestly.
Or interviews. Has she done a lot of interviews? I don't think so.
Well, she did. No, I mean, she did do one with the Journal Sentinel editorial board, and that didn't go so well because this sort of gaffe happened where she's threatening to sue people that she walked back a couple hours later. So, I mean, I think they've actually been using sort of the Tony Evers, Mandela Barnes, Josh Call approach, which is to wrap her in bubble wrap and
or
just sort of hide her.
The Biden approach, yeah.
Electric.
The Biden approach, just hide them and have a lot of money in surrogates. And I really hope that folks, and that's what the message, if you're in Milwaukee, I know she went on a little tour to a bunch of Black churches, and she's trying to reach out to Hispanic people. I really hope, I just don't do what other people tell you to do. You have to just look into who these people really are, and break free of the grip that the Democrat Party has on you, because this is a party that doesn't care about you. They don't care about Black and brown people. They don't care about the poor. They don't care about the ordinary man. They are an elitist party that uses people like the people that I grew up with, my family, where they use us. They use us for political advantage, and they use our votes and they throw us away, and they put rapists and murderers back on our streets to harm our children. And we have to break free from this dependency cycle.
So if Janet comes on, we'll do the same for her. We'll let her talk. Let her talk about how she wants to get the vote out, how people can help and all that. But we'll also ask her some very tough questions. And I don't think the liberal media have done that. And so someone wrote, on the thread that Janet on your show, really, laugh out loud. Wow, I'd love to have Janet on the show because I would love to.
We would welcome her, and we would be fair to her.
It would be fair.
We would be fair.
We would be fair, but we'd be tough. And that's when you'd see, what she's made of, quite honestly. And I just think, I'd love the chance because I don't think she's been asked very tough questions by anybody in the liberal media. So,
Scarlett, Scarlett, I know you don't know who Nick Harris is. One day, hopefully, we'll introduce you to her.
We love Nick Harris.
Nick, I know Nick is listening. Nick, there's a black square right next to Jessica there where you'd be welcome when you know what conditions.
Oh, man.
We'd love to have you on.
Can you imagine Nick Harris in this podcast?
Yeah, that would blow up the internet. Yeah.
I wish. Because of her job, she can't, right? We won't say more, but
that's all we'll say. But yeah,
that's all we'll say. Yeah.
All right. Very good.
Right.
Should we wrap it up?
Guys. Yeah.
All right. Good night, all.
Good night,
everybody. Good night.
Go vote.
Hey.
Go vote.